What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Age of Quarantine, this post-colonial holiday version of Age of Quarantine. My name is David Castillo from Saint Vitus. Thank you very much for joining us. And who's us? Us is Dana from Insect Arc, SWANS, also Moonlights in Zealand Ardor, an absolutely fucking fabulous musician. Cool as fuck, lived in Brooklyn for a long time, now coming to us from Berlin. So without further ado, let's get Dana on here. And guys, if you've checked out the St. Vitus sale and our new website today and have been buying stuff and whatever, thank you. So here we go. Cheers, guys. I'm drinking a little Espolon today. I need it. Dana.
Ahoy!
Yeah, there she is. Live from Berlin, everybody.
Get my seat figured out here.
Yes, that's good. The seating's got to be right. Feeling good.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing this. Thank you for joining me today. It's nice to see you. How are you?
It's good to see you too, David. Thanks for asking me to join. I'm doing all right. Yeah.
Cool. And you're in Berlin.
How are you?
Right?
Yes. I'm in Germany, and I've been here since March.
Oh, damn. Any particular non-COVID related reason for that, or was it just like time to make a move? What's the deal with being in Berlin?
So actually, Insect Arc was on tour, and we our last record came out in February of 2020 on Profound Lore, called The Vanishing, and we were on a tour of Europe, and we only managed to do a couple shows. We did the record release show at St. Vitus.
Yeah, that was in February.
At the end of February with some other folks, and then we hit the road and we played in Athens, which was great, with Bedouin, which was amazing actually. And then we got in like a couple UK shows and a Brussels show, and then the shows just started canceling because this was like early March, and we could have like done some of them, but they just were canceling left and right. So we basically hightailed it back to Germany, and I was waiting to see what was going to happen because my trip away from New York was supposed to be 3 months because I was supposed to start in Berlin rehearsals with SWANS, and then we had like 3 tours booked. So Andy Patterson, who plays drums in Insect Arc, went back to Utah where he lives, and I just kind of waited, and then everything fell apart, and March was a pretty sketchy time for everybody, and I thought maybe I'm better off in Berlin, so I kind of just holed up here waiting to see what happened, and then at a certain point, I mean, it just looked crazy over there, and I was like, man, I think I'm gonna just stay. I had a little niched, I had all my gear with me, and I was like, I'm just gonna stay, and so I haven't been home.
That's awesome.
Since the end of February.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's awesome that you could find a place to sort of like be and feel comfortable and good, and that it wasn't one of these, I did one of these with TJ from King Dude, and he was stuck in Sweden for like 6 months, but like it didn't seem as positive an experience as like you're sort of like, okay, we'll get back to Germany. I have like a little niche here, and then I'm going to make some decisions about kind of staying or going or whatever I feel like doing. So Dana, here at the Age of Quarantine, what we normally do is we kind of go through your sort of life and progression through music.
Yep.
I mean, you're really prolific, but you also are a multi-instrumentalist. You sat in with like amazing bands and played and contributed to like, SWANS and Zealand Ardor, but obviously you have Insect Arc. And then I feel like you add so much to people's records with all your lap steel
Oh.
playing and stuff like that. So let's just sort of start from the beginning. Where did you grow up, and what was like the earliest sort of experiences with music? Did you come from a musical family, anything like that? What was like the initial push or pull of music?
Yeah, I did come from a musical family. My mom played music, and we listened to a lot of music in the house, a lot of vinyl and stuff. And I started playing instruments when I was around 9. Um, I played flute, and then I played upright bass, and then my
Damn,
older
upright
sister,
bass. That's
yeah,
huge.
yeah, it was, yeah, I had to stand on a box actually. I wish I had a photo of that. But and then I think that was, I guess I was around 11 at that time, and then my sister and I moved to Oregon for 1 year because I grew up in San Francisco,
Uh,
and we moved to Oregon for a year, and we moved back the year that I was 12 and my sister was 13, and we started going to metal shows right away. So I started seeing shows, from age 12, and the Bay Area was just an amazing place at that time to see shows. And so I saw, I mean, the list is insane. So I had some of the best, you know, music around, just pouring out of every possible, you know, place.
yeah,
So
kind of just all around you. So you kind of
yeah,
grew up, it seems like, musical family, instruments are sort of readily available. You were trying a lot of different stuff, and then you're a young kid, you start getting involved in your own tastes and your own scene, and it seems like metal was, right there for you. What was like a was there like a friend or like a catalyst, like a particular moment where you're like, oh, I'm in this now, like I'm in a new world, and it kind of feels like what did I just discover? What did I find here? And I like it.
well, um, so I mean, when I was really a younger kid, I was really into sort of like hard new wave and like pop punk, like Germs and B-52s and more upbeat stuff. And I don't think, I guess when I discovered heavy music around the age of 12 and became, part of the scene, like the sort of the beginnings of the Bay Area thrash metal scene. Um, and, you know, became part of that community sort of as uh, like I guess, a fan, going to shows and being friends with these people. And everyone was like, you should play, because everyone was older than me, and they were like, you should play music, because by the time you're our age, but they were like 16 or 18, you'll be so good. And so um, but the person that was the direct inspiration for me to pick up bass was Cliff Burton, and he was a friend, and those guys were part of our group, and he was going to give me lessons, and he was always like, get a bass. And I was like, come on, Cliff, give me a lesson. He's like, get a bass. And I used to like drive around in his car with him and like listen to the Misfits. It was like, it's just, I was like a kid. I mean, I was not a kid, but I was kind of a kid.
Yeah.
So I feel really fortunate to have like known him, and
I mean,
yeah, it's pretty insane.
unquantifiable legends in
Totally.
every regard. Let me ask you a
Yeah.
question. When now that I kind of know this about you, did you ever get a chance, or were you going to like Ruthie's Inn and like those
Oh
sorts of
yeah.
places? Damn, dude,
Tons.
that's
I
so
was,
fucking sick.
yeah, my sister and I and our friends, and I'm in touch with a ton of those people. And my sister still lives in the Bay Area, and she's really, more in touch with those folks. But yeah, we were at Ruthie's seeing like Exodus and Slayer, and before Metallica like moved to the Bay Area. And we were just these like little headbanger chicks, at the shows.
Yeah.
And really, it was a very dude-oriented scene, but if you weren't like a girlfriend, you were sort of still allowed to hang. And so, it was more about that, you know, being just part of the friend group. And my sister and I would like tell our mom, like, sorry, we're gonna go to the East Bay for the weekend, and we would see shows and like party the whole weekend and drag our asses home on Sunday.
I mean, that's just an amazing time and time period to be around. You know, it's
totally.
Like, you know, like kind of classic periods of New York where I talked to certain people, like my friend Howie Abrams, and he's like, yeah, man, I saw Bad Brains at the Ritz with, you know, eggs and like fucking, and I'm like, dude, like, calm down. And he's like, yeah, and Living Color opened. I was like, what are you talking about? You know, so it's always inspiring to hear people. And also, like, you know, you're too young. You don't even know what the fuck you're like looking for at all. You're there. You happened in it and you discovered it, and that's great. And so thrash metal for you obviously is like, this is the gateway drug into sort of underground music. When did you start, you know, trying to attempt to play metal? Like you said, Cliff was maybe giving you some lessons. When did you really were like, okay, I'm going to play bass and I'm going to start a band? Or how did that all kind of come about for you?
Well, so Metallica was blowing up and they weren't really around that much. And, you know, as we know, like Cliff died on tour. You know, when he died, I got a bass within like a couple weeks. In my mind, it was like the next day, but I think it was probably, you know, like within like a week or something. And I went and I bought a bass. And then I had a friend who, she was not so into metal. She was more into like Velvet Underground and stuff like that. And she was like, hey, you know, come over and we'll like smoke some weed and I'll show you some chords and we play some like songs or whatever. Because by that time, I was actually kind of moving out of metal. Because I had been, you know, going to shows for like 4 years or whatever. And I was getting more interested in stuff like Bauhaus and, you know, darker, more sort of goth music. I was never like full on goth, but, you know, stuff like that.
Sure.
And so this friend of mine, so we would just like get really baked and, you know, I would play some bass. And then, so I guess I was 16 when that was happening.
Got it. And so that was kind of like the first experience, like, hey, we're fucking around, we're doing some stuff, and like, you know, I'm trying to like play and participate and stuff like that. But like, even your taste at that time already sort of evolving, sort of to be like, when I think of you, I think of really eclectic playing on a lot of different kinds of records, different stuff, like that, which is really like hard and like an amazing sort of thing, and the different ways you've sort of contributed. So when was it that you kind of like developed a band where you're like, this is my thing, I'm feeling like strong and confident about? Would that be like Be in Flower? Would that be the first time you did that, or what was sort of before that? I don't know the kind of order of operation. Too much stuff.
Yeah, of course. Well, there's been a lot. The first band that so I'm just kind of squirming around here. My phone kept falling over. My phone kept falling over. The first band that I was in that was like really like, yeah, I was like totally into it, was in I guess I was 20 or something, and I was in this band called Gift Horse. And Gift Horse was a 3-piece instrumental sort of proggy rock band, and I played bass, and this guy named Doug Hilsinger played guitar, and Jeff Whitehead, who a lot of people know from Leviathan, was the drummer. And the three of us had Gift Horse, and we played tons of shows, mostly in San Francisco. None of us knew anything about labels or promotion, but we had quite a following, and it was pretty active. Pretty intense, actually, in a way, pretty fast, like, but yeah, all that stuff's out there if some of you wanted to find it. Gift Horse, there's a couple records we made. So that was the first band that I was in that we would rehearse a lot, and, you know.
Yeah, interesting. That's so cool. And like, you know, for me, it's like, you know, Dana, I know a lot of what you've done, and like, that's one of the great things about this show is talking to people that you know, and even finding out. My mind's blown in 15 minutes. But so Gift Horse, you were with Jeff Whitehead, obviously came out Leviathan, obviously a Bay Area thing. And
Yeah,
so
totally.
when you say that's like, hey, my first real band, I know, like, you felt what it was like to kind of play out, do merch, like start getting kind of the ropes of like what it means to be in a band, because there's a learning curve there as well, right? Like you don't just like
For sure.
roll on stage, or like there's all these other parts of being a musician that surround the actual playing that you got to kind of learn. So Gift Horse is sort of that for you. And you said that you guys mostly stayed in the Bay Area. Did you tour at all, or I know it was kind of like at that time a lot of touring wasn't that developed either for a lot of stuff.
It unfortunately, it didn't really occur to any of us to like even really try to find a label or to tour, because we were pretty popular in San Francisco, and it's not like that we were just baked and like it didn't occur to us. Just I don't think that any of our friends were in bands that were on labels, so it just was kind of, we were really focused on the live thing and being part of our community, and the community was really active. There was a lot of bands that we would play shows with regularly in different venues in San Francisco. And when the band broke up, or just sort of disbanded, I think we realized that we had something that by today's standards probably could have been like marketed, I mean, we had a lot of Schechter fans and stuff. That was partially through Jeff's connection to the skating world.
Yeah.
But it would have been fun to tour that, because it was by far the most high energy band I've ever been in, and I think that would have brought on some good live stuff. But we just kind of stuck around, and I wish we had done more. But the recordings are existing still, so at least we got that together.
Sure, yeah, definitely. And not everything that you make or you do is going to be this thing that will like yield that. Sometimes you just make something and it was great for a year, and like some of the most amazing bands in history lasted for like 3 years or 4 years. Like it's these different moments in time, and sometimes you're not even that person anymore. Like you can't imagine doing it. Like I last night I had this weird thing happen where Joe from Paul Bearer hit me up, and we had jammed on some electronic music together, and we made this, and he's like, yo, I found this track on my hard drive. Did we make this together? And we had to like listen to this 10-minute like techno song and figure out if we made it. Some things just aren't, they don't make it, but they're part of the process of getting to where you want to go, right?
Yeah.
So like you said, that was like really kind of high energy stuff. You were only playing bass at that point. Really interested in, like it feels like you're going from this super sort of rock thing. And the way that I know you, like, is kind of where you sort of ended up. So I'm kind of like, it's like you see the ending to the movie, and I want to kind of know more about what happened. When did you start kind of like delving a little bit more into the psychedelic and the slower kind of like, kind of pace stuff that, I know you for? Was that after Gift Horse?
Yeah, it was. So I had a couple bands in San Francisco that I was experimenting with songwriting, because at some point it occurred to me that I had an interest in writing music, and I didn't really know how to find people that could play the kinds of stuff that I wanted to hear. And I was listening to a lot of, still in that sort of slower, darker thing, kind of going more and more. And I was really into like the Bad Seeds and stuff like that. And I didn't know that many people that were into that, or the people that I knew didn't have so much time. And so I was like, well, I could learn how to play piano. So I got a piano. I lived in a warehouse space, and somebody was like, hey, you want a piano? And I was like, yeah.
I'll got this piano.
Yeah, they just like rolled it into the warehouse. I was like, great. And then I had a little Casio, and I was like, oh, it'd be kind of fun. Like, sort of the beginning of the experimental thing, just trying different sounds out. And then in the warehouse again, like I got a drum kit, and I was like, just like hammering out these just really rudimentary beats, but enough to, write music that has like a different kind of structure to it. because being a bass player for so long, I realized that writing with drums is really helps you shape the bigger idea. So I basically just kind of taught myself all that stuff because I wanted to play this music that I couldn't find the folks for. And what ended up happening was at a certain point, I couldn't find those people, and I moved to New York City, and that's when I started being Flower. And that was kind of the culmination of the thing where I was, writing all the parts, writing a piano part, writing a bass part, writing a keyboard melody that might be, moved over to a guitar or something like that, and having like a basic sort of rhythmic idea.
Got it. So it was sort of, from everything I've gathered, it's like you had sort of these concepts in your head of like what you wanted to hear. And it was like, being the bass player is just like not enough. I need to kind of delve into songwriting. But what's so interesting to me about how you've approached it is like, maybe in nowadays, maybe people would be like, okay, I'm going to write a ton of stuff on the computer and to like figure that stuff out. It's like you went out and you're like, I got a fucking piano, I got a drum kit, and you sat. I just imagine this room with all these instruments and Dana just going from one to another to another, like trying to figure this stuff out. And you did this in a very organic way, an organic pursuit. And I think that maybe for a lot of people, especially now, they wouldn't really think of trying to flex those things that way. Was there any particular reason to that, or that like you felt, or were you just like, what, I just got to get the drum kit and just sit there and like struggle with it the same way that I did like a bass or anything else?
I think honestly, David, it was that I couldn't find the people to play the ideas that I heard, and it wasn't even that I wanted to be the band leader. It was that I would have an idea, and then it would lead to another idea, and then it would lead to another idea, and then I was like, damn, I just like wrote this whole thing. And then it's kind of a, actually didn't want to be in a thing by myself and tell people what to do, but I had ideas, and I was like, well, the best way to show something that you can't explain is by example. I mean, it is music, it's art, so you can try to make it and then show it to somebody and be like, okay, I'm not a drummer, but here's my like third grader approach to it, and you can do it much better, but you understand where like the thrust of the rhythm is, and that probably like where the kick beats are is something that we don't want to stray wildly from that, because it'll change the way that the thing kind of like heaves and hoes.
And since you're the bass player and you have a lot of the bass playing, kind of obviously mapped out and everything like that too, you don't want
sometimes that not. Sometimes the bass is the last thing, because I don't even have to, like, that just falls in.
Interesting. Just because you're like so familiar with it, you're like, the other stuff almost is like, it's a little bit harder for you, and then you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I got this. Like, that's fine. That's
really, but sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's hard, but I mean, it's not like physically hard, like difficult to play. It's more hard to find the, especially the more and more I get into really, really sparse music, which is kind of the direction I've been going for a long time. It's like really super minimal. It's about leaving space, and it takes a lot of self-control.
Patience.
Yeah,
absolutely. And that's one of the things I think as I've gotten into more music and stuff like that, I used to marvel at like the wild virtuosity, and now I marvel more almost at the patience of somebody who's like, that motherfucker's been playing that same drum beat for like 8 minutes. Holy shit. It's like a very different thing that impresses me maybe nowadays than when I first started listening to heavy music or different things. I'd be like, holy crap, look how fast they're doing this or whatever. So being Flower, let's talk a little bit about that. So you move, you're like, man, I can't find the people to kind of execute my vision. I got to go to New York and find some fucking weirdos to like crew up with and play with. Around what year was that, and how did you find trying to just execute that in New York? Did you feel like you found your tribe a little bit? Did it take a while?
It took a long time.
Yeah.
Well, it didn't take a long time. That was in '97, so it was a while ago.
So we were probably starting to hang out in New York City about relatively around the same time. You just, I think,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it didn't take a super long time, but part of my move was also that I thought it would be good to leave my hometown, which I think is generally, not a horrible idea for most folks. So there was a lot of stuff about San Francisco in California and just the West Coast in general that I had had enough of, so I wanted to kind of step things up a bit. So I thought, like, maybe if I go somewhere where I don't know anybody, I'll get, thrown into the fire. And that did happen. So the first things that I did when I was there, I had a place to land with a friend, and played in some ensembles with just like different sort of collaborative things. And I didn't really start being Flower right away. I actually joined Angels of Light, was my first
like
real band there. Yeah.
With them like in the early 2000s, I think, right?
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, I met Michael Jura. He was looking for a bassist, and I guess a couple different people said, "Oh, this woman Dana who's just moved here. You should, hit her up." And I had already been playing piano, and I had also been doing some singing, and I also had I had kind of expanded my musicality, so that was really good because that's what that band was about. A lot of people playing different stuff. So so I did that for a while, and after being in Angels of Light for about a year is when I actually found these people for Bee and Flower. I met a drummer, Ani Cordero, and she and I then met the piano player, Rod Miller, who I, strangely enough, live with in Berlin now. That's a long story how that happened. And then Lynn Wright, John Petro, just a bunch of different folks, just Bee and Flower, all New York based. And we kind of had that going for a while, and then there was some lineup changes. And when that thing sort of ran out of steam is when I moved to Berlin the first time.
Got it. So let me ask you a little bit about Angels of Light and Bee and Flower. So, obviously Angels of Light, that's Michael's group, and he sort of known as having high and exacting standards and this and that. And SWANS is obviously an incredibly influential band. What was it like playing with Michael at first? And was it a little bit trippy? Was it like kind of kind of hard to like kind of find your place in it, or was it pretty chill right away? And what did you take from that maybe you applied to Bee and Flower? Did you learn any lessons there that you felt, oh, this can be applicable to the things I'm doing? I'm watching, I'm under the hood with somebody who's like obviously a really big creative force.
Yeah, all that actually. I mean, Michael's vision and focus and determination is something that it's hard for anybody to match, I think. But to see somebody who's willing to, stand up for their ideas or fight for their ideas it's really inspiring, especially if you are somebody who dabbles with uncertainty, which I have, as most artists have. He's somebody who is extremely clear about what he wants, and he doesn't always know how to get there, but he's like, you show him and he's like, no, yes, now you will be playing that for the next 2 hours, like that riff or that line or whatever. So I hope that I never
do that for 3 hours.
Yeah,
shut the fuck up about it.
Yeah, exactly. So I hope that I never took anything so literal from that, but it was good to see. I mean, the main thing is it was just really good to be part of that group, and really, great musicians. Some of those folks are still really extra tight friends that I talk to all the time. And, seeing how that he built music was something that felt really natural to me because of what I had been, you know, sort of experimenting on my own with for the last few years. And I think that we have some similarities of, what do you say, like predispositions to certain kinds of rhythmic ideas and stuff. So creatively, there wasn't a whole lot of
Yeah, no,
fighting,
I
you know.
actually, I feel the same way. Like, to me, you playing with Swans or Angels of Light or anything like that seems like, out of a lot of the things you've done, besides like your own projects, I'm like, to me, stuff like Zeal and Ardor is like the outlier, you know? But playing with
Yeah,
Swans is like,
that was wild.
oh, yeah, I was like, this is like money in the bank. This is it. And what I didn't really know was that you were in Angels of Light only until we had spoken about doing this interview. And I was like, oh, wow, this is kind of like happened early and then, you know, kind of came back around into the Giraffe much later, but in between
20 years.
Yeah, which is really kind of remarkable. But within that, like you were saying, you moved to Berlin before that. So we had the New York years, and now we're in the Berlin years, part one, I guess.
Yeah.
What, you know, you feel like Bee and Flower started losing steam? Was it time to just kind of try a new energy? Is that what brought you to Berlin and to start making kind of music there, or what was the deal with the move?
Well, that was actually a very specific thing that happened, which was that Bee and Flower was sort of splintering, like on the level of sort of the members. And so the core of the group, which was the piano player and myself, moved to Berlin. And we moved here upon the suggestion of this guy named Larry Mullins. And Larry Mullins was in Angels of Light with me. Played drums and percussion, and Larry was really interested in producing an album for Bee and Flower, and I had never worked with a producer or anything. And producing in the really traditional sense of like coming up with string arrangements and getting really involved in not so much the nuts and bolts of writing, but transforming the music to something that it, excuse me, that it could be, instead of just, you know, having a really like outside creative force. And
not kind of like that Albini, like we press play, we set it up, it's fine.
Opposite.
Talking about someone who's like, this sounds great, but like, what if we added like this, you know, trombone here, or like
basically.
And you're like, oh, all right, cool.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's a big thing, right? That's the fifth Beatle or something. Like,
yeah, and so he didn't do things like say, well, I think we should trash that verse and you should triple the chorus and blah, blah, blah. You know, nothing like that. But some of those songs I had just written on a guitar or a keyboard, and he had an idea to turn it into this thing with like tons of hand percussion and string section. And I was really interested in just trying different stuff. So I was like, yeah, let's do it. So the three of us moved here, and in 2004, and that was like basically exiting Angels of Light. The three of us moved to Berlin and restarted the band here. And I stayed here for 4 years, and then I moved back to New York, actually.
Got it.
But we made an album here. Yeah, we made an album here. That was the point. We came here, we made an album, reestablished Bee and Flower as a Berlin band, and toured from here and stuff like that. Released the record. It's a pretty weird record. It's like, you know, very different than the first album, which had come out on Neurot Recordings. So it was, I think some people were confused by it. I think it's a beautiful album, but it's, you know, it's different than what I would have done on my own, because naturally, you know, that was the whole point, actually.
Yeah, totally. And that's something that you were willing to take the trip. You were willing to take the ride and do that. And sometimes,
why not?
It's important to just feel new energies and bring new things in, because that's how you also learn, you grow, and you do stuff.
Totally.
Within these moves and these things, I need to triangulate the position of when you started playing like lap steel on stuff, because I feel like it's become not only a calling card in insect art because it's so dynamic and beautiful, and how you do it, kind of, with some different effects and different things like that. And what you kind of get out of that instrument has become like a pretty large signature for you, that you've done it with all these other artists. So when did the love affair with that instrument start? Because we've got piano, bass, drums, and I'm like, when does the lap steel come into focus here?
So the lap steel came in. So I came back from Berlin to New York. I moved back to Brooklyn in 2008 and toured with different bands. Was just doing different stuff, just kind of living and focusing on my second career, which is computer animation. Just trying to like make sure that I could
make a living.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's
killer.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it's fun. I like doing animation. It kind of tickles my brain in like a different way.
Sure.
So I was working on that, and then I was trying to do Bee and Flower like across the ocean, like half of them were here, and then there was a couple people from the New York band that were interested in getting involved. I was trying to run this thing, and it had been going for too long, and I was like, we did another record, and then I was like, I think I'm gonna kind of put this on hiatus. But then I thought, after trying to run a band with a bunch of members, I just was pretty exhausted by that. So I thought, I'm gonna start something solo. And I had never thought like I could never. It's like, I'm a bass player. Like, what would I do solo? And I one day was just thinking like, okay, what could I do to make this different? And it was just in the very beginning of Insect Arc. I had no ideas what it was going to be, but I decided I was going to start a solo thing. And I went to Main Drag Music in Brooklyn, and I was like, they had a lap steel, and I was like, I knew what it sounded like, and I was like, hell yeah, I'm going to get that. So I bought it and just started playing it. I mean, it's pretty hard to play.
Yeah, no, that shit's not easy. And like, look, all that I do is I sing in bands, and then maybe like you, I was feeling like I've always gone out and enjoyed dark kind of club music, industrial, goth, post-punk, electro. That's always been me. I've gone to like shows, and then I've done that stuff. And at a certain point, I wanted some sort of more control and to learn more about myself musically. So I started this project called Confines, and now I know synths flying everywhere.
Yeah, you do. You have tons of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's really
Confines
fun.
Is awesome, though.
But sometimes it's just like one new thing, one new piece, and it's just like it speaks to you, and it kind of gives you a dimension. Like I made a record for the first time where I didn't sing on it. It was like the inverse, and now maybe I'm bringing some of those things back, but it was really fun to just go, you know what, fuck everything that I even know about myself. Is kind of like a fun thing to do, right? You're like, you know what, fuck bass, and like that thing on the wall, this lap steel, I'm gonna commit myself to that. And it really has been like this new path for you. I feel like in a lot of ways, Insect Arc is really beautiful. I love all of like the space and the vibe of it, but the melodies you get out of that piece and what you bring to it really is like the voice, like the character of it, so much so to me that I'm like, it's almost to me like you found the singer of the band in a way, like in the store, and you figured out how to like write music for it. It's like incredible in that way. So that's super cool. So when you started kind of coming up with that, was it just like, a lot of trial and error and kind of like, hey, maybe I'll throw this thing through a delay pedal and see what happens and this and that?
A lot of delay pedal. I love this delay pedal. Well, interesting that what you were saying about like with your project Confines, when you're alone and you try something new, and you're coming from spending lots of years, developing your other things. You walk into it with all the experience of being able to trust your judgment, right? Because you know this from being in bands, you can trust your like ideas of to sort of guide you when you have this new thing. So if you get a new synth or a new controller or something, it's exciting and you don't really necessarily know how to use it, but you know how to like, filter your approach based on, you trust your instinct, and you do something and you're like, yeah, cool, like that sequence I just think like that just opened up the door. So in that sense for me, having a new instrument was exciting. I mean, it's a specifically difficult instrument because it's fretless, and
Yes.
you can make a lot of really bad sounds on it initially, like a lot of really like dying animal sounds, and I later figured out how to like that when I wanted to make the dying animal sounds, like cool, okay, but
Yeah.
initially I didn't want to be like a country player or something, so it wasn't an issue.
Yeah, no,
But I just
it's the
sat down with it.
intentionality of it all, right? It's like you're like, and sometimes maybe something even decent comes up, but you're like, fuck, I didn't try and do that. And then you're like, why?
But does that happen to you though, when you have new gear? You're like, well, I didn't mean to do that, but that's cool because you get to be surprised, which is really nice.
Yeah, I think that's like really something you're surprised maybe by yourself or and how you're like approach something, and they're like, damn, how did I get here? But this is pretty cool. Or maybe I don't understand the thing that much, but I'm like, it sounds pretty fucking good, but I'm like, how did I make that or something?
Yeah, how did I get there? And well, with knobs and buttons, it's hard too, because you're like, what did I just
like sometimes, or I'm not very like dexterous and stuff. I'm not like you, who's been practicing instruments like all the time. So maybe I play something and then I'm like, how did it get back to those chords or that like melody, especially in that realm? I'm like, I have to feel my way back around to it. But like maybe for a hot second, I got something that I really liked, and I'm just fucking about,
Yeah.
Those things are really like interesting. And like you said, with you, it's like with the fretless thing, and like, I think about like, these instruments like a theremin or these other like wild instruments that I'm like, how do you tame this thing, like it, and just the techniques to it. I find it like fascinating from a musician point of view, but like honestly, I think that like most people are looking at music from the visceral point of view, and I think what it adds to the band is like when I'm sitting in this room, which is my studio, and I put on like insect art and stuff, it's really just the trip of it all. Like you get this beautiful psychedelic vibe out of it that I'm like, that's what I just feel off the bat. Like I don't give a fuck what's making it. I'm just like, wow. Right. And then when I saw what it was, I was like, get out of here. No way. This is crazy, So it's just kind of amazing to me that that's just the way that happened, because it feels so intentional. Like there's like no way, like, okay, a lap steel, like you got to kind of commit to that. It's not like some preset or something,
That's true,
and you do it beautifully, and it gives so much character, to the project and to what you're doing. So once you start kind of like establishing that, when did you kind of feel that like you started arriving at like, this might be like the insect arc thing? Like I have, this sort of doomier, more psychedelic, sort of spaced out avant-garde thing. Like it started really coming into focus, I feel like a couple records ago, where I'm like, Dana's like, this is the Dana thing. Like I kind of like feel it, and like she's got like a lane now for this band, and obviously it started to be getting bigger and bigger noticed by different entities and people, and more touring and stuff like that. When did you feel like sonically though it like kind of coalesced into something you're like, that might be a road to go down?
I guess, I mean, in the beginning I had a 7-inch which I made within the first couple months of having the setup, which was, at that point I was programming drums, and I was using Ableton on a laptop on stage. I was using it as my looper, and I had programmed drums, and I would play bass and lap steel over it. And then I did a 10-inch, and that was kind of more active and less careful, and I was like, this is really interesting, and I was kind of a little more able to control the instrument and coax different kinds of sounds out of it. I guess it was around the first full length, which was 2015, which is called Portal Well. It was still a solo album. I did everything on it, but I was actually able to.
Yeah, and it has like that kind of like egg-looking cover on it and stuff. Because that to me is like the first time I really. Because you also played with Terrence Hannum and Locrian a little bit. Like I think that you guys have been playing together, but I know you played on a record. I felt like as I was discovering Locrian and some of these other sort of like avant-garde sort of like, you know, metalish bands, it's like when I stumbled on Insect Dark and I was just like, ooh, this, and I'm like, oh, she's from Brooklyn. Oh, okay, cool. You know, like I was discovering a lot as well and learning a lot about stuff as I'm obviously booking bands and doing that nature. So, and I felt like it was really, it was unique. It was like, whoa, okay. I literally listened to it, and that's why when I first saw it, I was like, I don't necessarily know what this is.
Yeah,
like,
I didn't know what it was either.
I'm like, is that a guitar? I'm not sure if it's a guitar. I don't care. It's dope, but I'm curious. I always love when I can't figure it out, and then I need to see the group to understand how it works. That to me is always interesting. Like I love that, and that was sort of what yours. So Portal Well was like a moment where I started to like really like engage with you and your music. So for you, you felt like that's where it started like really coming together. Like okay, and did you have a drummer by that point, or were you still programming?
When the album came out was right when Ashley Spungen joined. So she joined for the tour. And at that point I was like, man, I'm super bored of playing shows like with fake drums. Like I couldn't get it up, you know. I could, but I was just like, this is really dull for me. I mean, it was obviously way simpler to be in a band by yourself. Like, you know this from having a solo show. Okay, yeah, you got to load all the gear by yourself, and it's way more pressure, and you don't have to try to communicate. But from a performance,
right here is very chill.
Yeah, exactly, right. I mean, yeah, exactly, right. I mean, and honestly, that was a lot of the reason that I started a solo thing is that the exhaustion of trying to keep a band going. You know, if you're the band leader, you got to like schedule everything, all these adults with lives. I was just like, man, I couldn't do it with Bee and Flower. So I was like, I'm going to start something. I'm just going to do whatever I want, and I'm just going to follow it. But after a few years of it, I was like, you know, sure would be killer to have a drummer. So that's when Ashley joined, and then we made a record together called Marrow Hymns. And that was, by that time, I felt like that's when I actually felt like I could play lap steel. I don't call myself, I would never call myself a guitarist though, still. But that's when I was like, oh, I actually can like play an arpeggio. Like I can actually play a melody and not be totally, you know, out of pitch or whatever.
Sure. So. And you know, I remember at Basilica, you two playing, like pouring in, beautiful setting, just absolutely gorgeous.
That was fun.
That was a great show. And just sort of like really feeling like, okay, Dana's been growing this thing and now it's starting to really like bloom. The drummer really felt right. And at a certain point, it's like, you know, there might be like this rugged determinism to do those things yourself because you've had those experiences, but it's cool that you did that because I feel like aesthetically you did take a bit of a jump in the right direction as well. And like sometimes, you know, you can't be too like have too many rules for yourself, you know? And
yeah, for sure.
That was such a beautiful moment and a great time. And with that record coming out, and I'm like, okay, now going off to play Europe and doing stuff, I was like, wow, all right, this is awesome. And I love to see that. I thought it was just really wonderful for you guys, really well deserved. And then, you know, just kind of blossoming into that. And then I think right before that, or not too long in between that, I got to mention that you just like played a US tour with Zeal and Ardor too. And I never really seen you, you know, play fast
Yeah.
Really.
It's
And
hard.
Homegirl is crushing it up there. It's awesome.
It was so
And
hard.
not like a, incapable or anything, more like I just had never seen it. And it was
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I was like, whoa, okay, this is wild. Sick, Dana. Doing it.
That was
How was it
intense,
just like
yeah.
having that quick moment with,
It was super fun, actually. I mean, it was like, the band was all New York people, so all friends like Lev and Nick and those guys. And yeah, I mean, that was something that was really like a job that sort of popped up where they, they needed a pickup band in the States, and did I want to do it? And I was like, yeah, hell yeah, I'll do that. I had to really practice a lot on my own because I'm not used to playing fast like that, like with a pickup.
We're going back to the gift horse days, we're going.
It's way faster.
Yeah, we're going
way
faster. In. We're going to Bonded by Blood.
Yeah. Yeah, man, it was really hard, and I did it. I went on tour with Wreckmeister harmonies that I was playing lap steel with, like pew, pew, like super spacey, like Pink Floyd stuff, to go playing this like very like almost technical, bass like metal, and to make the Dylan Island thing a little harder was that we did the rehearsals 2 months before the tour because that's how the scheduling worked out. So it was pretty hard. Like we rehearsed and then there was a 2-month break.
Yeah, for sure. That is really, really
not
intense.
Perfect, but we did it. It was really fun.
Yeah, that's just a cool experience, and a cool project, and also again just something that you're sort of added to it. And like, I mean, by now, people watching who've like been with us, it's like, dude, we've gone from Angels of Light, Swans, Leonardo, the bands that you were like kind of the band leader of. I mean, you've been woven into a lot of different scenes, a lot of different stuff. It's a pretty amazing journey that you've had through all this different stuff, 3 different cities, all this. So taking it into today, obviously we started with, having the show Vitus, Vanishing comes out on Profound Lore. It's a great fucking record. I was just listening to it before this just to kind of like I like to listen to unlike a show where if I go to a show, I don't like listening to the band the same day. It's like maybe like an old hardcore taboo that like you just don't do that, and the band will be bad or something.
Right.
But with the interviews, I like to always listen the same day because I feel like I listen really hard and I try and understand the character of things so I can like really talk about it. And, when you first start talking about space and like kind of the patience and the dynamics of everything, it really shines through on that record. I feel like it really, you get all like the beauty and the psychiness of it, but it really just, it has space, it has moments, and it kind of lets you breathe with it for moments. And I feel like that is really powerful, and it goes back to kind of the things that you were saying earlier where you're like, those are things that really kind of you notice in terms of like your songwriting, things that you're trying to achieve. Do you feel like with the Vanishing you were like, okay, I'm like really getting the rests and these different moments in between things to make things a little bit more powerful?
Yeah, I mean, that material was definitely intended to take a lot of the ideas that the band, myself, and also with Ashley, but me being, the primary writer the whole time, I've always been trying to figure out how to boil things down to their most purest essence. And over time, I found that leaving more and more space it soothes me somehow. And it's not to say that I don't like music that's complex and has a lot of notes. It's just that for what I make, that's not what inspires me. So we were on a pretty tight schedule with preparing the writing because we had this tour booked that our manager Nikos had set up with Oronsi Pazuzu, and the plan was that we were going to record as soon as the tour was over, the US tour, and we did it. You know, there was a lineup change. Ashley was out, and then Andy Patterson, who a lot of people know from Sub Rosa, he came in and was like just totally went into full-on gear with me. And so our rehearsals were tour rehearsals, like brand new, never having even really played together. And I was like, here's the songs, and like coming up with drum parts and getting ready to do it live, which is a two-piece. There's a lot of pretty complex looping technology going on, you know, analog looping. It's pretty intense. So learning how to do these songs that had never been played live before, but then also preparing to record them and sort of thinking with two brains, and we just kind of went for it. And I went to Utah where Andy lives at his studio. We just hunkered down there for like a month. And we were in his beautiful giant studio in Salt Lake City, which is this really vast room with a view of the mountains when you go outside there. And it's just, I think it helped the thing breathe even more. And he's just, his sensibility is, you know, he also really gets like where to leave the break and like when to pull it back and when to let something breathe. And it just came together, like really.
That's amazing. And just, you know, that relationship, you know, a lot of things in music are the things that you hear are like human relationships too. You know, what he's bringing to it, what you're bringing to, even the setting that you were just saying, help make the record. It puts you in a state of mind, a mind frame that it doesn't feel claustrophobic. It feels like easy and sort of enchanting in this way. And I love things like that because they take me places, you know. I'm in my fucking house in New Jersey right now, and like, you know, going on a trip is a nice thing, you know, even being at home. So that's like a really beautiful thing. And for you guys out there, it's like, if you haven't heard this record yet, please do so. It's like absolutely beautiful and just like a really cool listen. Definitely worth your time. So Dana, we got like a couple of minutes left. So I just want to, you know, thank you for joining us and, you know, taking the time out. I know it's a little bit late in Berlin and stuff like that. Right. I'm glad to hear that you're well. And, you know, we can't wait to have you back at Vitus when all this bullshit's over. And you know, looking forward to seeing you play music again and do what you do. It's always a real pleasure. Thanks, David. Thanks so much for having me. And thanks for anybody watching. And yeah, I'll be back. Hell yeah, absolutely. Dana, take care. Right. Have a great one. Thanks. Bye.